Hey there, and welcome to White Women Wake Up. I'm Janelle.
And I'm Karen. We're your co-hosts here to create space for honest, open, and sometimes messy conversations about what it means to wake up as white women in a world shaped by cultural bias and privilege.
So we're coming at this from two very different life perspectives. I'm navigating the way I show up in the world with more awareness, compassion, and accountability. It's honestly not always easy and can be pretty uncomfortable as I unpack my inherited biases, but it's work I really am excited to do. And Karen and I are really happy to take you all on this journey.
Growing up as a baby boomer in a white Protestant home, I didn't often think to question the norms and beliefs around me. Over the past several years, I've taken the time to reflect on those experiences and found better ways to align my actions with my values.
And now I'm a millennial. I grew up to be very curious, open-minded, yet I'm still learning the ways I've benefited from my white privilege. This generational gap between us is part of what we're really excited about this podcast. We're leaning into our differences, our experiences, our approaches, and discovering what we can learn from one another in the process.
Before we dive in, we want to be clear. We are not experts. We're just two women doing the work to unlearn, relearn, and grow in real time. This isn't about having the answers. It's about being willing to ask the hard questions and lean into the discomfort of growth.
Exactly. We for sure do not have all the answers, and we're not here to pretend like we do. What we are willing to do, though, is ask the tough questions, be honest about our own blind spots, and have these uncomfortable conversations with each other and hopefully you. This isn't a space for shame or guilt that honestly will not benefit anyone. Instead, we want to foster conversations that are honest and vulnerable so we can all grow together.
Our hope is that you listen. You'll feel inspired to have these conversations in your own circles with your family, your friends, maybe even with people whose beliefs or politics are vastly different from your own, because it's where change begins.
So it's really important for us as white women to open our eyes and ears to the world around us, create a world that uplifts everyone. We need to examine the beliefs, habits, and systems that have shaped us. We can't move forward without acknowledging what has been holding us back.
That's why each week, Janelle and I will bring a new topic to the table, something we haven't discussed yet. These unscripted conversations are designed to dig deep and get to the heart of what we're exploring.
We'll talk about things like privilege, accountability, allyship, and the way we can challenge harmful patterns. But don't worry, we'll also explore how to find joy, connection, and community along the way. It's not all heavy, but we really believe that transformation can be empowering and even liberating.
We'll also invite guests to share perspectives beyond our own. This podcast isn't just about us. It's about broadening the conversation and continuing to learn from others. And we want you to be part of this community. If something we say resonates with you or if it challenges you, we'd love to hear from you. Send us your thoughts, your stories, or even your questions. Push us, share with us. We're all learning together.
So whether you're just beginning this journey or you've been doing the work for a while, we hope White Women Wake Up feels like a safe space, an inspiring space to land. We plan to listen, a place to listen, reflect, and discover new ways of being in the world.
In this first episode, we thought we'd introduce ourselves and share why we felt compelled to start this podcast. Janelle, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so for me, this podcast honestly was really born out of a deep desire for accountability and growth, not just for myself, but to bring others along who are willing to join us. My journey began a few years ago when I started reflecting on how much my worldview had been shaped by the environments that I grew up in. I was raised in Seattle, pretty liberal area, attended what I saw at the time was a progressive church, and I went to public school. I thought I had a pretty open-minded perspective on the world around me, and I've always considered myself someone who fights for the truth, someone willing to challenge what doesn't sit right. But as I began unpacking my understanding of white privilege, I realized just how clouded sometimes my view had become during my life. Over the past several years, I've been learning how deeply ingrained cultural bias can be, especially for white women. Even when we think we, quote unquote, mean well, it's humbling to realize how often our actions or inactions uphold systems of harm, whether we've really intended to or not. I wanted a space to dig in with the curiosity and vulnerability. It's easy to stay in your comfort zone, but I really believe in the real work is waking up and showing up. What happens when we are willing to get uncomfortable, listen, and learn. So I'm really excited to continue learning, and I'm hopefully growing a new community with curious women too.
Giles, thanks for sharing. It really is important to examine the culture we've inherited. For me, part of my unique story is that the women in my life considered themselves progressive. They valued helping those in need and advocating for women's rights. Yet, because of my Christian heritage, there was often roadblocks to that growth. What I now see is some patriarchal values. They were framed in terms like submission and often motivated by shame. At the time, I didn't realize how much I was shaped by or participated in systems that oppressed others.
It's so true. Isn't that humbling, though, to really realize that even with our best intentions, we've caused harm?
Thankfully, I've really been lucky in the last several years to be around people who have continued to challenge my perspective and help me stay aware of how I'm showing up for myself, my community, and others. I'm naturally a curious thinker, and I'm inspired by the idea of using creative imagination to grow new systems that are more inclusive and equitable. That's part of what brought me here.
This podcast is really about taking ownership of those blind spots and committing to do better, not just for ourselves, but the people and communities we care about. It wasn't until I started unpacking those ideas that I began to see how complicit I had been, not just in what I did, but also in what I didn't do. I've come to realize that, quote unquote, being a good person isn't just enough. There needs to be deeper questions asked. What systems are we upholding? How are we listening to marginalized voices? How can we support and amplify perspectives outside of our own?
Exactly. This is lifelong work. It's not about checking a box. It's about staying curious, open, and willing to grow. That's what this podcast is all about. We're creating a space to ask the hard questions and sit with uncomfortable truths and grow together. Okay, Janelle, what topic were you curious about?
Okay, so I am going to start us off with our first inaugural podcast. We're going to see how this goes, everyone.
I'm getting nervous.
Oh, yeah, don't get nervous. It's a relevant topic. I guess we'll just dig in. Have you heard of the blue bracelets happening?
You know what? Honestly, no. Give me a little background.
Little context. So they came out of the election, this kind of trend of blue bracelets from white women, well-meaning white women, who wanted a signal to say, hey, I supported people of color. I didn't vote against you. I voted for you, for the 47% of women who voted for a female president. And so a lot of women came out, they built Etsy shops, they did a bunch of things, but basically just signaling that I'm a safe space for you is kind of what's been happening over the last couple months. So
this to me, this is why Janelle and I like to talk. This to me, I think is really interesting because I think it speaks right away into our unwillingness to be uncomfortable. So let me give you an example. I remember in 2016 when we're trying not to make this political because we really do want to be open-minded here.
We do.
And so, but I remember when Trump was elected, and I remember walking into a 7-Eleven, and for the first time in my life, I felt my whiteness and I felt my age. Because people were looking at me like, you're a white woman that voted in a way that doesn't benefit me. Oh, and so it was really like, I felt really uncomfortable. And I wanted some outward mark to tell the world, no, that's not me. That's not me. I voted to benefit you. I care about you. And I realized, wait a second. Maybe I need to be uncomfortable. Maybe I need to not run away from this. And I need to, why do I need to broadcast that I've done some work, that I've tried to hear perspectives of others? Why does being uncomfortable? Because I don't want to be uncomfortable. And I think this is a number one issue for my whiteness. Being uncomfortable is not comfortable.
And your generation too, a
Yeah.
little bit more. I mean, I hate to say it. A lot of the Etsy shops are my generation. I also, can I be honest about something?
Yeah.
I did not think that was going to be your response.
What do you think my response
I
was
did a
gonna
little
be?
prejudging, and I did kind of think you would initially be like, great idea.
Yeah.
Like, let's show support for people. Let's, show them with our blue bracelet so we are on their side. But you are hitting into a lot of the things that I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
About it. So but it's good to know that you shared that perspective. Can I say a little story of mine?
Sure.
So for context for the audience, this blue bracelet thing, this phenomenon actually is called performative activism. So it has a name around it. The name was coined during actually the George Floyd marches and protests happening. And I admit I was part of the initial performative activism. I don't know if people remember, but there was a thing going around Instagram where you put a black box on Instagram and it was supposed to show support for people of color. And I didn't question it. I thought, great, that's something easy I can do to show my support. And I think it goes back to your point that you're saying. It was something easy that I felt like I could do to show support.
Yeah.
And the reality is, unfortunately, easy isn't always the right answer, especially when it comes to social justice and breaking down cultural biases, but we want easy answers.
Yeah.
We're uncomfortable. We want an easy fix and solve and move on. And so it felt right. So I have fallen prey to performative activism before. Sorry, I'm struggling with that word, everyone. Activism. But yeah. So
you were surprised because you thought I would want to wear a blue bracelet?
I kind of did. I kind of thought
I get the desire for it. Believe me, when I walked into that 7-Eleven and I felt very self-conscious, I wanted a big sign that said, no, this is not, I'm not the white woman they're talking about. But the reality is I am the white woman they're talking about.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
We're all still the white woman. Even if we did one action to support, we're still the white women that...
Well, and I think one of the reasons, like we talk a little bit about why we wanted to start this podcast is I have these great stories in my past. And we like the word awakening or wake up because we aren't all woke. We won't be woke forever. We are on a journey, and we're on a journey that's constantly learning, right? And so I remember being in a DEI, and I know sometimes that's triggering for people to use the word DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. But I was in a DEI workshop, and I befriended this Black woman, and I was all excited because I was doing my work. And she said to me, she said, "You will not be back. You can leave this room and you are white outside in the world.
Wow.
I leave this room and I'm Black outside of this world. And we will never be treated really the same." And first of all, I was a little upset. If we're going to be honest, we're going to be creating vulnerable conversations. Because I wanted to befriend this woman. I wanted to learn her perspective. I wanted to gather from her. She was a beautiful woman. I wanted to consume.
Yeah.
Actually, maybe that's a bigger word. I wanted to consume. I wanted to consume her knowledge.
Pretty common.
And she didn't feel like giving me her knowledge. She felt like having me do my work. And so this conversation of every time I'm in the world in my white perspective, it is different. I'm treated differently. I need to understand this platform. And so I guess this is what this conversation's about, kind of doing our work. And so that we're not making persons of color do that work for us.
And we're using a lot of words right now, harm, doing our work, waking up, that I think we do need to kind of like backtrack a little bit and explain some of that stuff.
Yeah.
I completely agree with you. Why we were very intentional about the terms white women wake up as the name for this podcast is because we are peers of each other. It doesn't mean that there aren't other groups out there that need to start working and start breaking down their biases. Totally agree that pretty much everyone in life has some sort of work to do towards outside communities and support other communities. But for us, white women are our peers. White women are, who we understand in the community that we're in. And so we felt, it's kind of like the call's coming from the inside. We need to build each other up and educate each other in a way that, again, like we said, is not shame-based. It's not harmful. I think the big topic of today is discomfort, as we said. And a lot of times people don't get in these conversations because it's uncomfortable. And it is interesting. I've done a lot of research around comfortability and how it relates to actually, like, it's kind of a plague within whiteness, but also white womenness. They've done a lot of studies around white women in particular really fawn away from being uncomfortable. And it's not to say that it is not a natural instinct. No one likes to be uncomfortable. But oftentimes white women in society are allowed the privileges and the resources to overcome uncomfortability.
Oh, Janelle, that is so true.
And so this is why, again, this is really important for us to sit in these uncomfortable moments and kind of talk through it. And so that's what we mean when we say doing our work, is really allowing us to sit and learn from outside perspectives. And again, also learn to ask the uncomfortable questions, but in a space of understanding in this community of white women. Because I get how sometimes it's scary to maybe ask a person of color perspectives on things. And as you were saying, they don't want to teach us anymore. They have been working so hard to help and support us and learn. And the reality is we need to learn how to support them from each other or from the internet, or there's a million resources available to us to learn how to support communities outside of our own. And we need to start doing that work together. I'll never forget, and this is where some of my learning, this was only a couple years ago. I had a friend of mine, and she's a white woman, but she's a Jewish white woman. So there are some, and she's married to a black man. And she was frustrated with a coworker at the time for, again, not doing her work, asking kind of some questions, putting some things on my friend. And
Was this primarily about religion?
It was primarily about race.
Yeah, race.
Topics of race. It was during like Black Lives Matter movement when that was spiking. Thank you for clarifying the context. And so it's primarily about race. And I took my friend outside of her perspective of having a black husband and being a Jewish woman. I took her as another white woman. And I was like, no, you need to help and support and teach her and learn and give them, the tools kind of thing to help support your peers. But the reality is she was speaking from a person of, she had been doing the work, she had been helping, and she was tired of doing that. Saying, hey, you have resources. It is not my job to teach you how to be more respectful. Like it is your job to research, to better yourself kind of thing. And so that's even like my recent perspective of how just these disconnects of how we really need to make sure that like we are talking to our communities, and that's how we're building each other up.
Yeah. I think, Janelle, it's interesting when you talk about the language of uncomfortable, because you said that's kind of your theme, and maybe the blue bracelets is that theme of uncomfortability, right? I think one of the things that you and I have been really challenged over the years is, I know from we've had good conversations looking at our generations. Your generation, Janelle's younger, I'm older. Your generation has grown up in a world of curious conversations. Maybe that's the way to say it. That each of you are willing to talk about conversations that maybe my generation wasn't so forthright. I'm still, I'm still from the generation of children should be seen and not heard kind of thing, right? Like we would go to the dinner table and all the adults would be talking and the children weren't allowed to talk. So maybe that's a little bit of where I'm at. And so when you've brought up subjects before, sometimes I thought you were being just really rude. And it's like, oh my gosh, do we need to be even talking about that? And what I've learned is in my evaluation of thinking that you're rude, I've also been an obstacle or a roadblock to have those conversations because, and maybe one of the reasons I am uncomfortable having those conversations is because I didn't really have the vocabulary around it, or maybe I didn't feel that my perspective brought value. So one of the things, we've talked a little bit about vocabulary, and that's something I want us to talk about in the future. But this idea of vocabulary, like we have a really good friend, I have a really good friend who's queer, my age, white woman, who doesn't like the language of queer. The word queer is difficult for her. And yet your generation, queer means all people with fluid identity and dealing with their sexuality. And so the word queer doesn't feel uncomfortable to you. So I think what I'm getting at is part of the reasons we're not having these conversations, it goes back to our theme of uncomfortability, is we just don't have the vocabulary or shared vocabulary to have these conversations. And so maybe we're construed, my generation is construed as ignorant or dumb or uncaring, when I don't think we're truly uncaring. It's just maybe we don't have the language to dive deep with your generation.
I totally agree with that. And not everyone in my generation has it easy as it either. But I think to your point is when you don't have the vocabulary or you don't feel like you have the knowledge base, it is very vulnerable to get into a deep discussion. And so therefore it can become defensive.
Yeah.
And so I think circling back, that's again what we really want this community to be, is a place where you hear us ask the uncomfortable questions and kind of get in, and you see our vulnerability around, hey, we're talking about this again in a space that's free of shame and free of guilt. So hopefully it opens up and allows you to talk and have these conversations. I think we're almost out of time here.
Oh, I have a really good suggestion, though. Okay, so, it's interesting. Wait, did you want to just say one thing?
There's a couple things I wanted to say before we wrap up.
Okay, go for it.
No,
well, I have a task for us at the end, and maybe that's kind of a fun thing to do. Go ahead, you go.
So what I kind of wanted to wrap up in, I wanted to let everyone know. So I've done a lot of research on performative activism. We barely touched the tip of the surface today, but our intent is we're going to start bringing you some blog articles, some just places where you can explore and read more about these topics, since I have a feeling we are going to have barely touched and scratched the surface of all of these topics. So that will also be up on our website, hopefully pretty soon after the podcast is updated.
So when you, can you just do one more thing? When you talk about performative activism, is this a negative? Is this a positive? Is it just generic? I mean, we don't have to have positive and negative.
Performative activism is definitely harmful. So again, it's one of those things that, as we had spoken earlier about these actions or inactions that we take that create harm, performative activism is one of those. It's something that we are very well meaning. The intention is there, but for the most part, it's pretty harmful. And
so we can jump in and get out.
So we can jump in and get out. So really a lot of the reasons it really impacts women is or especially women of color, it creates tokenisms for women. So we kind of create these just labels around someone. It also creates a lot of emotional labor for women of color. So that's something that we had talked about previously. A lot of emotional labor, because a lot of times they have to do the explaining of what the white women, what we're even activating on. And then, and so other things and this has happened time and time again with the Me Too movement, people would come in and they were well-meaning. It happened with Time's Up, challenge accepted. Again, all of this will be more information within our website.
Yeah.
But there are 3 things that consistently people talked about that are really great key takeaways. Number 1 is center marginalized voices. So even if you don't have the time to take the action that maybe you want to act, centralize marginalized voices. And so what this would look like is instead of putting a black box on Instagram, it would be posting quotes from Black women, or from women of color, from queer women, queer or trans women. It would be really uplifting and tagging these other voices in the movement or in whatever's happening, whatever you want to naturally protest or activism. So with my, again, Instagram example, it would have been, instead of putting a black box, it would have been taking a great quote from one of my favorite books.
Maybe it's just even reading a book.
Or it's reading a book. So, so center marginalized voices is the first thing that you can really do. The second is prioritize actions over optics. So again, this is going back to like the optics. So the blue bracelet is an optic.
Yeah.
It's something, it's an object that makes you feel comfortable, and it's an optic towards things. Maybe take action instead of a way of telling someone that you're safe, show them you're a safe space. So show them by ways of
just hanging out,
listening, volunteering, showing people. But
I think let's go simple. Let's go real simple.
Okay,
because I think white women are great at volunteering. So I don't think it's about volunteering.
No, agreed.
I think it's as simple as just sitting in a conversation with people so we get to know. It's this language of proximity. Okay, so we're going way too far now.
Yeah.
We're gonna regroup
far.
tomorrow. This is gonna be our challenge every time, but we want to keep this podcast at the length of a commute. That's what we said. So I have one takeaway.
Okay.
I want us to start being comfortable with being uncomfortable. And so pay attention to when you're uncomfortable. Does it kill you? Does it harm you? Or is it just purely uncomfortable? And the longer that we can kind of sit in our discomfort, that means maybe we could start inviting uncomfortable conversations. Does that make sense?
I like that. So what I hear you saying, or at least what I'm going to do, is just like write down the moments that make us uncomfortable. in the week.
Or just pay attention to it. I just talked to my mother and it was a little uncomfortable, but pay attention to it. And is it that hard to stay a little bit longer in that discomfort? Because that's our goal here, is to be able to have conversations that are meaningful so that we can grow, be vulnerable together, and learn from one another so that we can embody these experiences of other people.
I love that. I think that's a great takeaway.
Okay, Janelle, let's do the sign off.
Well, yeah. No, thank you for joining us today on White Women Wake Up, our first podcast.
Hey, woohoo.
We hope today's conversation sparked some reflection and inspired you to engage with the world in a new, more thoughtful way.
Remember, this journey is about learning, unlearning, and showing up with authenticity. If you like this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, connect with us on social media. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, stay curious, stay open, and let's keep waking up together.